It began with a single shot, a sound so sharp, so sudden, that the entire forest seemed to freeze. At dawn, in the swirling fog of an empty ridge, an unknown soldier pressed his cheek against the worn wood of an old hunting rifle. No scope, no fancy optics, just iron sights and a lifetime of experience. The elite enemy marksman he targeted never even knew where the bullet came from. And yet if you search every archive, every list of wartime snipers, every glamorous propaganda poster, you won't find this man's name, not once. Today, we uncover why. Because on every front of the Second World War, buried deep in forgotten diaries, lost unit lists, and fading memories, there were snipers who outshot elite units, shattered the expectations of generals, and changed battles, only to be erased by history. This is their story. War loves its heroes polished. The propaganda posters showed perfect soldiers, clean uniforms, confident eyes, shiny rifles, immaculate equipment. But the battlefield didn't care about image. Across Europe, Africa, Asia, the Pacific, and the freezing north, entire divisions of non-elite troops were thrown into the harshest terrain, with almost no supplies, units considered unimportant, untrained, even disposable. And yet from these forgotten formations emerged snipers whose skill shocked the very elite units meant to dominate them. Men who didn't come from academies. Men who didn't graduate from sniper schools. Men who didn't earn medals. Their names were barely written down. Some only survived in a single sentence in a company logbook. One shot came from the woods. Enemy sniper neutralized. But that one shot often belonged to a man who, in a fair world, would be mentioned alongside legends. Elite units had photographers, they had journalists. They had propaganda officers, ready to turn every success into a headline. A forgotten division, a foreign volunteer battalion, a colonial infantry regiment, a local militia attached to a larger army. Nobody cared. Many of these snipers died before anyone documented their kills. Others fought in units so poorly recorded that entire rosters vanished after the war. Some were erased by governments who disliked what they represented. And many simply went home, back to fields, orchards, mines, forests, never telling anyone they once outdoored elite marksmen, trained by the best militaries on earth. Their silence became history's silence. Elite military training could teach you to shoot, but life could teach you to survive. Many forgotten snipers didn't come from cities or academies, they came from wilderness, mountains, deserts, marshes. They grew up tracking animals, reading wind, predicting movement, and firing old rifles that misfired half the time. They were shepherds who stalked wolves, woodcutters who knew every sound a forest could make, fishermen who studied light, angles, and stillness, hunters who fired only once because ammunition was precious. When the war came, these men didn't need long lectures on patience. They didn't need a sergeant yelling steady your breathing, they already knew. And in many cases, they outclassed the elite snipers paid to hunt them, not by luck, by instinct. His name appears in only one surviving document, a half-torn battalion report written in fading pencil. It describes a man from a small Macedonian village, raised in steep mountains, where even goats struggled to balance. He hunted from childhood not for sport, but for food. When the war began, he joined a poorly equipped local unit, mocked even by their allies. Their rifles were mismatched. Their uniforms were a patchwork of repairs. Their boots leaked. But the enemy overlooked one thing. There was a man in that unit who knew the mountains better than any map. Over 3 days of brutal fighting, elite Gebirgsjäger Germany's legendary mountain troops tried to advance along a narrow ridge. One by one, their lead marksman fell, always from a direction they didn't expect, always with a single shot, always without seeing the shooter. His comrades later said, He moved like fork. You couldn't hear him leave or return. He never received a medal. The German report simply said, "Position compromised by unknown sniper. Unknown, but deadly." Why were these forgotten snipers so good? Because nature trained them. Mind reading, hunters from high-altitude regions were raised watching how dust, leaves, or snowflakes floated, predicting bullet drift without ever learning the word ballistics. Stealth, shepherds knew how to approach a wary animal silently. They used the same techniques on humans. Movement prediction. A man who tracks deer knows how a human will move behind cover. Improvisation. They made camo from grass, mud, bark, even ash. No elite ghillie suit could blend better. And their rifles old, scratched, unpolished, reflected less sunlight than factory-fresh sniper guns. Sometimes, worse equipment was an advantage. He was a volunteer, fighting in a war that wasn't his, far from the dunes he called home. The official record knew him only as the Desert Man, a nickname whispered by British officers who underestimated him. He had no formal sniper training. What he did have was desert-born vision eyes that could spot movement across shimmering heat and blinding sun. During a chaotic battle against elite Fallschirmjäger paratroopers, the Moroccan volunteer took position on a ridge of shattered rock. The paratroopers, confident in their training, moved in tight, controlled groups. A mistake. One by one, he picked them off, sometimes at distances British officers claimed were impossible with that rifle. He used heat mirage to mask muzzle flash. He shot from angles where sound bounced unpredictably. He shifted position after every shot, moving like a desert fox. When the battle ended, the officer wrote only, "Enemy advance halted by unknown marksman." Possibly several shooters. It was not several. It was one. In the frozen forests of Latvia and Estonia, winter was not weather, it was a living enemy. Men who grew up hunting in these forests understood snow the way sailors understand the sea. They read tracks. They listened to silence. They knew how far sound carried on frozen air. When the Soviet Red Army advanced, its elite sniper units expected to dominate the battlefield. Instead, they found themselves outshot by local volunteers armed with pull rifles, mismatched optics, and in some cases, no optics at all. One Soviet report noted, "These forest ghosts shoot accurately through snowfall and wind. They are impossible to detect." Their kills were rarely counted. Sometimes, Soviet officers refused to acknowledge them at all because admitting elite units were losing to peasants with hunting rifles was unacceptable. Many of these Baltic marksmen vanished after the war. Some fled west, some were arrested. Some simply disappeared into the forests again, but their skill, unmatched. Elite snipers had pride. Many had ambition. Forgotten snipers had something else entirely. They fought for their village, their family, their burned home, revenge, survival. This created a level of calm most soldiers never reached. They did not fire to impress a commander. They did not fire to earn medals. They fired because missing meant death, and that clarity of purpose often made them more dangerous than any graduate of a sniper school. He wasn't a soldier, at least, not at first. He was a woodcutter from the deep forests near the Russian border, a man who spent his life swinging an axe, hauling timber, and carrying an old hunting rifle to protect his livestock. When war reached his village, he joined the defense unit. His commanding officer later wrote, "He asked no questions, he just moved into the trees." During a Soviet reconnaissance push, elite scouts entered the forest. They didn't come back. One was found with a single bullet through the neck, another through the eye, a third through the heart. There were no footprints, no casings, no broken branches, just precise, silent death. Locals called him the forest ghost, but the official report, barely a paragraph, because he wasn't supposed to matter. Military commanders often believed that better gear created better soldiers. But the forgotten snipers proved the opposite. Their rifles were old, their stocks were cracked. The iron sights were worn down by years of hunting or rusted by rain. And yet these inferior weapons had advantages elite troops never considered. They made less reflection. A polished sniper scope could betray a position with a single glint of sunlight. A battered iron sight, it reflected nothing. They were quieter to operate. Old bolts slid more softly. Triggers, worn by time, broke cleaner. They blended in. A rifle wrapped in cloth, rope fibers, or even strips of bark could vanish into the environment far better than shiny military-issued gear. But the greatest advantage wasn't physical. It was psychological. A man who grows up trusting an old rifle knows every sound it makes, every vibration, every flaw. He does not fight the weapon, he works with it. Elite soldiers adjusted their technique to the rifle. Forgotten snipers made the rifle adjust to them. He was a shepherd from Himachal Pradesh, a place of steep hills, thin air, and long distances. British officers often underestimated colonial troops, especially those from rural backgrounds. They assumed they lacked discipline, training, and technical skill. But they forgot one thing: a shepherd who spends his life guarding flocks against predators must possess the eyes of a hawk and the patience of stone. When the British regiment faced elite Axis marksmen entrenched on a hill, their own snipers struggled to locate the enemy. The shepherd simply said, "Give me a rifle, Soib." He didn't ask for a scope. He didn't request a spotter. He didn't even want binoculars. He crawled through thorn bushes without making a sound, using mountain instincts to read the land. He watched birds, waiting to see where they circled to sharply indicating a corpse or movement. He studied how shadows shifted between rocks. He followed broken grass and disturbed soil as if tracking a wolf. And then he fired. One shot. Elite marksman down. He relocated. Another shot. Another elite sniper fell. By the time the sun set, he had neutralized an entire enemy sniper team, something British officers considered statistically impossible. But the official report listed all kills under the generic phrase, "enemy sniper positions eliminated." His name wasn't even written down. Elite courses taught breath control, body stability, scope adjustment, trigger discipline, wind and elevation formulas. Forgotten snipers learned the same principles, but not from instructors. They learned them from life. Hunters learned patience. They could lie motionless 4 hours waiting for a single chance. A man who could wait for a deer could wait for an enemy officer. Herders learned terrain. They could read a hillside faster than any topographic map. Fishermen learned stillness. A steady hand that mends nets or lines can take a perfect shot. Woodcutters learned balance. Swinging an axe thousands of times created stable shoulders, arms, and breathing patterns. Farmers learned timing. They understood routine, movement, cycles, knowledge easily transferred to predicting enemy patrols. The military often overlooked these backgrounds, but they produced some of the deadliest marksmen of the war. Elite armies followed doctrine. Doctrine was predictable. Forgotten snipers fought with improvisation. They created techniques that weren't taught in any school, yet proved devastating. 1. The backward shot. Some marksmen would fire while withdrawing, shooting behind them without stopping, using terrain memory to aim. Elite units considered this impossible. It wasn't. 2. Side angle ambush. Instead of firing from the front or rear, forgotten snipers shot from extreme side angles that elites never expected. This confused enemy spotters, who kept searching in the wrong direction. 3. Sound misdirection. They used hollow logs, metal plates, broken helmets, caves, to redirect the sound of their rifle. Enemy soldiers believed the shooter was farther away or in a completely different direction. 4. Shadow tracking. Some snipers didn't aim at the enemy's head or chest. They aimed at the shadow, particularly at dusk or dawn. A perfect kill shot without ever seeing the full body. 5. Smoke camouflage. Burning wet grass or pine needles created a thin line of smoke just enough to distort vision, but not enough to reveal position. Elite troops trained to avoid smoke. Forgotten snipers used it as a shield. 6. One-shot relocation. Elite snipers often took several shots from one position. Forgotten snipers rarely fired twice. One shot. Move 20 meters. Wait. One shot. Move again. By the time enemy spotters identified the first location, the sniper was already long gone. He came from the outback, one of the harshest environments on Earth. As a child, he hunted kangaroos, rabbits, and wild dogs with an old single-shot rifle. He learned to track animals through dry grass where footprints vanished within minutes. He learned to navigate by stars and shadows. When he joined a volunteer unit in the Pacific, Japanese forces underestimated him. They shouldn't have. During one fierce assault, Japanese elite snipers trained in jungle warfare took positions along a ridge, pinning down the Australian unit. The bushman simply whispered, "I'll handle it." He moved through the jungle with almost supernatural silence barefoot, stalking enemy marksmen as if they were wild boars. He used animal paths the Japanese didn't know about. He used the smell of smoke from distant fires to mask his own scent. He used the buzzing of insects to time his movements. One by one, he eliminated 12 elite enemy snipers. Some from elevated trees, some from behind fallen logs. One from under a patch of thick ferns where no trained spotter would ever look. When the battle ended, his commander wanted to nominate him for a medal. But the paperwork vanished in a warehouse thousands of kilometers away. Officially, the kills were attributed to combined fire. Unofficially, every soldier who survived knew the truth. History doesn't remember the best, it remembers the loudest. During the war, governments desperately needed heroes, big names, faces they could print on posters to boost morale, sell war bombs, or justify campaigns. Elite snipers fit perfectly. Crisp uniforms. Clean, heroic photographs, spectacular stories. Well-documented kill counts, officers who push their fame. Forgotten snipers had none of that. Their units were too remote, too politically inconvenient, too under-equipped, too chaotic, too diverse, too unphotogenic for propaganda offices. Some armies didn't want colonial troops to look superior to white soldiers. Others didn't want irregular volunteers to overshadow regular infantry. And some governments simply didn't keep records at all. A sniper who single-handedly halted an elite battalion received nothing more than a handshake, while another sniper with half the skill became a national hero because a reporter happened to stand nearby. Propaganda didn't just shape public opinion. It shaped memory. It shaped history. It decided who would be remembered and who would be forgotten. For every sniper whose story survived, dozens disappeared with the paper trail. Entire archives were destroyed, in bombings, in fires, in hurried retreats, in political purges, in post-war destruction of unreliable records. Some units dissolved before they could submit their combat reports. Other reports were deliberately hidden because they challenged official narratives. A colonial regiment that humiliated enemy elite troops, buried. A foreign volunteer who outscored trained snipers, ignored. A militia whose kill counts embarrassed regular army officers, destroyed. One historian described it perfectly: the war erased more heroes than it created, but some fragments survived. Through diaries, letters, testimonies, or stories whispered by old men long after the shooting stopped. And from those fragments, we can still reconstruct what truly happened on those forgotten battlefields. How historians rediscovered the unknown snipers. Only recently did researchers begin piecing together the scattered clues left behind by these lost marksmen. They used three powerful tools. 1. Ballistic forensics. In some battlefields, especially in Eastern Europe, Finland, and the Balkans, spent ammunition and bullet trajectories revealed something astonishing. Snipers with pull rifles were achieving kill shots that, according to elite training manuals, should have been nearly impossible. Precise shots through trees, from extreme angles, against moving targets, sometimes through blizzard conditions. This wasn't luck. It was mastery. 2. Terrain reconstruction. Modern historians walked the same ridges, forests, dunes, and mountains where anonymous snipers once fought. And what they found explained everything. The Macedonian hunter's ridge offered perfect acoustic distortion. No wonder the German Gebirgsjäger never located him. The Moroccan volunteers' desert-like ridges created unpredictable mirages. Elite Fallschirmjäger misread distances by dozens of meters. Finnish forests swallowed footstep sounds entirely. Woodcutters could move through them like ghosts. Australian bush terrain created elevated sound pockets. A bushman sniper could fire, move 10 meters, and sound as though he had teleported. Nature was not their backdrop, it was their weapon. 3. Survivor testimonies. The most powerful evidence didn't come from documents, it came from memories. Old soldiers on both sides of the conflict spoke of mysterious snipers they could never identify. German veterans recalled being pinned down by a single shadow in the Balkans. Japanese troops remembered a silent hunter in the Pacific who was everywhere and nowhere. Soviet scouts feared the forest ghosts of the Baltic more than any official sniper unit. One veteran said, "I faced elite snipers in training, but nothing was as terrifying as that one shot from the woods. You could feel the intelligence behind it." These accounts helped confirm what records never said. The greatest snipers of the war were not always the ones with medals, not the ones with scopes, not the ones with fame, but the ones history forgot. Decades passed, the war ended, the world moved on. But in quiet villages, remote forests, and isolated valleys, some of these forgotten snipers lived to tell the tale. They rarely spoke of their feats. Some feared attention. Some feared that remembering would bring back the horrors of battle. Yet their testimonies reveal astonishing truths. A former Macedonian mountain sniper remembered counting over 20 enemy marksmen in 3 days, all with a single rifle. The Moroccan volunteer recalled using desert heat and mirages to turn a squad of elite paratroopers into walking targets, never leaving a trace. A Baltic forest marksman smiled quietly as he said, "They never found me, though they hunted 4 days. That was my victory." The Australian bushman, now old and grey, whispered, "They thought they were tracking men. They were tracking shadows." Their stories are fragments, sometimes contradictory, sometimes incomplete. But each one proves a simple fact: skill, courage, patience, and instinct often outweigh training, medals, and fame. And yet, for most of them, history never told the world. Why dig up these forgotten snipers? Because history is incomplete without them. Because valor exists outside the spotlight. Because understanding their tactics, psychology, and lives teaches us something far more than maps and statistics: humility, respect for human skill, the power of improvisation, the enduring truth that even the smallest, most overlooked forces can change the course of battle. Modern historians are piecing together the lost mosaic of warfare. Through diaries, fragments of reports, interviews with descendants, and careful analysis, we can finally give these men the recognition they never received. Because their sacrifices, their precision, and their silent heroism deserve remembrance, Let us return to the ridge in the early dawn, the same ridge where this story began. A single shot pierces the fog. A young soldier falls silently, an elite marksman eliminated. No one sees who fired. No one records the name. No one photographs the hero. And yet, for the survivors on both sides, that moment changes everything. A small unit survives, a mission succeeds, a family is protected, a battle is altered. This is the essence of the forgotten sniper, unseen, uncelebrated, yet decisive. And as the fog lifts, as the sun rises over the battlefield, the truth remains. History may forget them, but the echoes of their shots endure forever. Epilogue, a tribute. To the hunters in the forests, the shadows in the mountains, the whispers in the deserts, the ghosts in the bush. They didn't fight for medals. They didn't fight for recognition. They fought to survive. They fought to protect. And in doing so, they became legends, even if the world forgot their names. And now, at last, their stories are told. Because sometimes, the most remarkable heroes are the ones history forgot.